secret is that when you do sit in Kriya, the left foot should be over if you can, or the left foot should be pushed against the thigh, or if you're sitting on a chair, put your left foot up and squeeze it against your perineum there. Just push it into the thing. And you want to just, push it in a little bit on your left foot. So it's like, so just now I'm going to chant Om in a particular way with you to start this work. And follow me on the Om and keep your hands flat on your knees. Even if you're sitting on a chair, it doesn't matter. Just put your hands flat like this. And imagine you have three centers, three knots. One right here in your third eye, one in your heart, and one at the Muladhara. So you are creating a flow. So as you start from, its grace is pouring down and you are rising up. So we do it like this. This is an old way of doing it, which is Om, 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 and then down. Om, Om, Om. So it's 3, 2, 1. Ready? Third eye, looking up into the third eye. Om, 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 Om. Now you do it silently. Now bring your mind down to your Muladhara at the back. And you're going to go up the back of the spine. You're going to go upwards through the back, through each chakra. Ready? But each time you're going to do Om. Om. Do it quietly in your mind. I can chant it for you. Om. Come up the spine, to the back of the spine, to the Swadhisthana. Om. Then come to the navel area, Manipura. Om. Then come up to the heart chakra at the back. Om. Come to the neck. Om. And then come to the back of your head at the bindu, right there. Om. And then come down to the agya in the middle of your head, pineal gland. Om. And now bring it down the front, going down. Om. Heart. Om. Manipura in front. Om. Yoni Linga, Swadhisthana, Om, and then back again in the Muladhara. Om. Again. Om. 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 Open your hands flat. Om. 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 Relax. Keep your hands open. So how many felt a tingling of bliss slightly up the spine? How many of you? So this is I can see all of you. So how many of you have read Autobiography of a Yogi? Oh, most of you. My God. All right. Very good. How many of you came to Indian spirituality because of Yogananda? How many of you came because of Yogananda? All right. Now, Yogananda's teacher was Swami Shri Yukteswarji. And Swami Shri Yukteswar's teacher was Lahiri Mahashaya. And Lahiri Mahashaya was the first person to revive the ancient knowledge of these techniques. And he was initiated by Babaji, who is the famous Mahavatar Babaji that you've all seen pictures of with the long hair, young looking. And he met Babaji in a cave up in the mountains near Almora in India. And he called Ranikhet, in a place called Ranikhet. There was an old cave there. And he was a railway inspector. So he used to travel around India. You know, he needed an excuse to meet all these holy men. So he became a railway inspector. And he would travel around all the railways of India. Now you're talking 1850s and 60s, 1840s and 50s, sorry. You know, he went around all over India, and he had heard this legend of a immortal young sadhu who lived in the area around Ranikhet. And at first he had heard it was in a place called Badrinath, but then he heard it was in Ranikhet. So he went up the hills looking for this, you know, exploring. And this voice, this is his own words, this voice came to him and said, Lahiri, you have come? That was it. And he says, you have come back to where you're from? And he had never been there before in his life. And oh, that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And he came there and he spent a few days with him. And he was initiated, he was already a yogi, but he was initiated into these. And when he came down, he didn't call it Kriya Yoga. That was not the name he gave to it. The name he gave originally was Sahaja Yoga. Sahaja. Sahaj. Sahaj means the complete union. Complete union. And what he would do is he would tell his students, okay, now go home and practice this, do the kriyas at home. And from that, it became known as Kriya Yoga, right? This was the funny part about Kriya Yoga. So Kriya means action. And Kriya is an advanced form of pranayama, right? So now we, in India, we have 3 or 4 main ways of achieving enlightenment, samadhi. 3 or 4 paths one can take, general paths, right? The first path is the path of yoga, or most ancient probably, is what is called Vedanta, which is the end of the Vedas, from at least 2000 BC. And from that came a tradition called Advaita Vedanta, which was there was a series of these beautiful writings called the Upanishads that came out. There were different teachers in forest ashrams all across North India, and they were teaching these ideas of self-examination. Who am I? And the Upanishads are considered to be the greatest work in history of the question of who am I. So the greatest practitioner in modern times of Vedanta was 2, Swami Vivekananda and Ramana Maharshi, right? And Ramana Maharshi wrote a famous book called Koham Soham, Who Am I? I am that, who am I? And basically, it's a philosophy that says that you are that infinite mind behind everything, that singular mind, Now, Vedanta was the foundation upon which most of Hinduism was built, right? Parallel to Vedanta were ancient shamanic and mountain practices, which we now call yoga. So Hatha Yoga was developed much later, but yoga was known. In fact, Buddha was a yogi. Everybody who did practices at that time were yogis of some kind or another. And the first major treatise on yoga was called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and that was written around the 3rd, 4th century BC to 2nd century BC. And what is now known as yoga, of the 84 postures and the different ways of working, is called Hatha Yoga. And Hatha Yoga was a development a little later by a teacher called Matsyendranath and then his student Gorakshanath in the Himalayas. Many believe that Babaji was actually Gorakshanath. There's an old tradition that says Gorakshanath is actually Babaji. And many people claim that Gorakshanath was Shiva, because Shiva taught yoga to Matsyendranath. So the lineage of when you hear Nath, right, that's that tradition of Gorakshanath. And in fact, Babaji was known as a Nath. He was called a Nath. He was a Nath. And he was many believe he was an amalgamation of many Shiva and Gorakshanath and many other, beings of the Himalayas that came together that Lahiri Mahashaya created. But there probably was such a man at that time who, and it is said that he was a tantric, and then later on, other schools emerged like Tantra, which gave us twofold schools. One was the Kundalini school, which is called Krama or Kaula, which we do with Devi, Shakti path, which is Kundalini is the upward movement of ascension to divine grace, and then divine grace comes into you. So Kundalini is different from Sahaj Kriya, different, because Kundalini is an effort on your part to raise your consciousness through the chakras, through the spinal cord. What is called Kriya Yoga is opposite. In fact, it comes more out of Vigyan Bhairav Tantra and Kashmir Shaivism type origins. It is the descent of grace. Grace has to come in, right? Through seeing it in the third eye and bringing it to the heart and then bringing it down. That grace has to come in. And this whole idea of Kriya Yoga is one primary pursuit: Ananda, total bliss consciousness. That means we want to live continuously in bliss. It's very similar to the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra and the teachings of the Trika, which I've talked about earlier. But Kriya Yoga, as we know it, is a series of hacks to hack your consciousness. That means that the stuff I've taught you about 18, 20 kriyas, buns, kriyas that you can do. All the ones I've taught you, talabia, thokar, all these ones, khechari, we're not doing real khechari, because real khechari, the tongue has to go right back. We're doing a mild khechari. Then, it is like, so the whole purpose of Kriya Yoga is to experience bliss, Ananda, in a permanent state. What we call, in all the traditions, Sat Chit Ananda. That means the truth of my being, of my actions, my being, the consciousness of my realization of that, and the Ananda, Chit, Ananda, the bliss that I experience when that happens. So what was developed by yogis, and many yoga schools like Shivananda schools and all have taken Kriya Yoga into their systems, but this older technique, which was there for thousands of years, were techniques to hack yourself to enter that state of super consciousness and then bliss. So the methodology was to completely calm the body down, to completely become still, not a movement in your body, right? And then to open the gateway to the superconscious side, and then bliss descends into you. Simple formula, isn't it? Sounds simple. But it is simple, but it requires work. So when one does Kriya Yoga or Sahaja Yoga, and Sahaja again was co-opted by another Kundalini school called Sahaja Yoga today, which is not the same thing. Lahiri Mahashaya called it Sahaja Yoga. Is how can I bring myself to complete peace, right?